In just over a week's time, the 2024 Rugby Championship competition gets underway, and we're going to see Argentina, Australia, the New Zealand All Blacks and the South African Springboks take each other on again this year. It's going to be a fascinating series. In this series of videos, I'm looking at each of the teams, seeing how they're travelling so far in 2024, and giving you some of my early predictions for what I think is going to happen in the Rugby Championship. Today I'm going to be talking about New Zealand and how they've been going in 2024 under their new head coach Scott Razor Robertson. I'm going to be looking at the squad that's been selected and give my thoughts around that. G'day everyone and welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a retired Kiwi bloke living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. And I just love making videos about rugby. Although at the moment the Olympic Games is ambushing me with so much to watch there. It's been pretty exciting. And we're just over a week away now from getting underway in the Rugby Championship. So I'm going to make a series of videos. I've already made one about South Africa. Go and check that one out. Today's video is about New Zealand, looking at their year so far, the games that they've played, having a look at the squad that's been selected for the Rugby Championship, and just give my thoughts and views around what I think might happen in this first round. Earlier in the week, next week, I'll get into a full preview video once the teams have been announced and give my in-depth analysis on what I think is going to happen in those first games. Okay, so let's kick off by looking at the All Blacks squad that's been selected, and we'll start off in the forwards. And in particular in the hooking position, and the three hookers that have been selected by Scott Razor Robertson for the Rugby Championship competition as Asafa Amur, Cody Taylor and George Bell. And I think can't go wrong there with those three. I like to see Amur getting more start time for the All Blacks. I just think he's going to grow into one of the superstars of this All Black team come the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027. And looking at the props that the All Blacks have selected, and we've got De Groot, Lomax, Newell, Tossie, Tuangafasi and Williams, and some big boys in there. What's going to be interesting with this is to see how Robertson uses these props in terms of starting and coming off the bench. I think a lot of them have specialist skill sets, although Fletcher Newell did start against Fiji. I think he's more impactful coming off the bench. Just my opinion on that one. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I'd like to see probably De Groot and Lomax getting the start for the All Blacks in that front row just to consolidate their position. But it could go either way. I think some of those boys are playing very, very good rugby. Of course, Williams is a great young player and shows a lot of promise for the future as well. Another one that I expect to be a very, very good player by the time we get to the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027. So moving on to the locks for the All Blacks in this squad, and there's four locks that have been selected. We've got Scott Barrett, we've got Tupu Vai, we've got Patrick Tuipulotu, and we've got Sam Darry. So position that the All Blacks, a lot of people have said online the All Blacks are struggling a little bit. It's always very hard when you're replacing such giants of the game such as Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock, and the All Blacks are going to need just a few years, I think, to breed the next group of fantastic locks. But I think these four boys are going to do the job in the Rugby Championship, and it's going to be interesting to see how Scott Razor Robertson uses them in terms of interchange and who actually gets to be the starting pair. Of course, Scott Barrett has been the captain of this All Blacks team. Now moving into the loose forwards, and this is one of the most interesting positions I think throughout the All Blacks squad, and a lot of different options here, and also again depending on how he's going to have impact off the bench. I think that's something Scott Razor Robertson will be looking at very carefully as he goes through his team selections for the upcoming games in the Rugby Championship. And if we look at the loosies, we've got Blackadder, we've got Sam Cane coming back into the fray, and that's a really interesting one. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that Sam Cane's work rate and his leadership around men will be very vital to the All Blacks, I think, in the Rugby Championship. So don't be surprised if we see Sam Cane early in the championship. And then we've got Finau, Jacobson, Papali'i, Adi Savia and Wallace Satiti. And boy, what a great group of Lucies that is. Again, the key here for me is fundamentally going to be around who starts the game and who comes in off the bench. That's going to be really, really interesting. And someone like Satiti, who's a young player coming into the All Blacks for the first time this season, how much game time is he going to get, and is he going to be featuring in those big games in the Rugby Championship? And you can probably call them all big games this year, and I'll explain a little bit more around that in this video. Okay, so that was the forwards. Now let's have a look at the backs that have been selected in the squad for the All Blacks, and we'll start off at halfback. And I guess one big note here is, as I've been saying throughout my previous videos, no Finlay Christie, and it looks like Razor Robertson agrees with me on this one, at least for the Rugby Championship squad. And Finlay Christie's All Black career at this stage has been put on hold, as he's gone in a different direction with his selection of All Black halfbacks. And I think this is a very good move from Scott Razor Robertson. It's showing intent in terms of what type of game the All Blacks want to play. And again, I've mentioned a number of times that I just think Finlay Christie is too slow at the All Black halfback position, and that's been vindicated, I think, in the selection of this particular squad. I know a lot of you disagreed with me, but this is what Razor Robertson has decided for this particular squad. So at halfback we have Hotham, we have TJ Perenara and Cortez Ratama, and boy, that excites me with Ratama coming in there. I hope he gets a start in these Rugby Championship games, and having TJ to come off the bench I think is an ideal situation for the All Blacks. If they're having to chase a game or they're under a lot of pressure, someone with his experience I think is going to be a very, very good interchange player for the All Blacks. But I'd like to see Ratama start these games. I think he's got the energy and the speed that the All Blacks need to have in their decision making, but also in his distribution and technical skills, and I think that's going to be very important throughout the Rugby Championship. Then moving on to the number 10 position, and a couple of interesting ones here. We've got Damien McKenzie and Beauden Barrett selected in this position, so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Scott Razor Robertson actually uses Beauden Barrett in the 10 position, or whether he's going to be used as that floater coming off the bench to cover either 10 or 15. That's going to be one of the really interesting factors of this Rugby Championship. And I think there's going to be a little bit of experience play going on here from Robertson, because we've had those first 3 test matches. Now we're going up a level in terms of consistent week in, week out competition for the All Blacks. And it's going to be interesting to see how these guys go in those respective positions. Okay, and then we move on to the centres, and only one really change or addition in this area, and we see David Havili coming back into the All Black fray, which is an interesting one. And we've got Geordie Barrett, Rico Ioane, we've got Billy Proctor, and we've got Anton Leonard Brown. So a pretty good centre pairing there. Again, it's going to be really interesting to see how Scott Razor Robertson uses these centres throughout the Rugby Championship. I was very impressed with Billy Proctor and his performances both in offence and defence. He did very, very well in that game against Fiji, I thought, and deserves a start against Argentina. And I just think it brings something a little bit different to the All Black backline. But what is Scott Razor Robertson going to do against Argentina? I'll talk about that next week once we've got the selection of the team that's going to play Argentina out, because then we'll be able to talk a little bit more about strategy. So David Havili coming back into the All Black squad for the Rugby Championship, and obviously being able to cover any injury position, but will he get a start in any of the games or come in off the bench? That's going to be one of the interesting questions there. And then moving on to the outside backs, and a couple of really interesting selections here that I'm in favour of. And we're seeing Ruben Love come in for the All Blacks, a wonderful signing, the fullback, and he can also play in other positions. He actually wants to play number 10 as he gets deeper in his career, so it's going to be interesting to see whether Scott Razor Robertson embraces that vision and dream that he has. But we'll see if he comes on and has any impact at fullback in any of these games for the All Blacks. Welcome back one of the All Black superstars, and that's Will Jordan is back from injury, and that's fantastic. He's actually going to be playing a local game this weekend in New Zealand to test that shoulder out. Of course, that's where he had his bad injury, and hopefully he gets through that all right, and we see him in the lineup against Argentina next weekend. That's my hope anyway. And a try-scoring machine, Will Jordan, and he'll fit right back into this All Black squad. So it's going to be interesting to see what way Scott Razor Robertson goes on the wings. The rest of the outside backs, we have the same players we saw in the first 3 games for the All Blacks. We've got Caleb Clark out there, we've got Sevu Reece, Mark Talia, and we've also got Stephen Perifetta. So is this going to be a case where the All Blacks are putting Perifetta at fullback and they're using Beauden Barrett in a different way? It's going to be really interesting to see how they go on this one. So a lot of unanswered questions at this stage for me on this All Blacks squad, and in particular on selections for that first team. So I'll have a go at my first team selection for the Argentina game next week in a video, so look out for that one. There we go, some really interesting positions in the All Blacks squad for the Rugby Championship. I love the fact that Ruben Love is in there. I think he definitely deserves a go, and I like the decision that Scott Robertson has made around Finlay Christie. I think that's a positive move, showing the intent of the way the All Blacks want to play their game. So the All Blacks have played 3 games so far this season, and of course they had those 2 incredibly tight test matches against England. They won the first one by 16 points to 15 in Dunedin, just 1 point in that one. Could have gone either way, but the All Blacks got over the line there. So they beat England in the second game at Eden Park in Auckland by 24 points to 17 and put a rubber stamp on that series against England, against a very good England team playing some very good rugby. And what that those 2 games against England provided for me was it showed where the All Blacks are lacking a little bit, and I think that's what Scott Razor Robertson would have taken away from those 2 test matches against England. It showed that we had trouble in the lineouts, in particular with communication and just throwing, and that was something that needed to be sorted out. But we saw how Maro Itoje really got in the faces of the All Blacks and disrupted them. So going into the Rugby Championship, that's going to be an area where Razor Robertson is going to have to focus his energy and making sure that those lineouts are going to be a lot more effective against the likes of Argentina, Australia and South Africa. And then the All Blacks headed off to San Diego to do that game against Fiji, which I thought was a brilliant thing for World Rugby, having a game of that magnitude in the west coast of the United States. And of course the crowd turned up, over 30,000 packed into Snapdragon Stadium to watch the All Blacks beat Fiji on this occasion by 47 points to 5, a comprehensive All Black victory. A few new players in the team that Scott Razor Robertson was giving an opportunity to, and I'm sure that game served its purpose in terms of giving him an eye on some of those players that might have been on the peripheral of All Black selection, and also deciding on how the All Blacks wanted to go into this Rugby Championship competition with what style of play. So 3 wins on the trot for Scott Razor Robertson in his new position as head coach for the All Blacks. But now the real series starts. The Rugby Championship is going to be a great litmus test for him and his team, and also for the All Blacks squad. And I talk about depth because I think it's going to be one of the most important things as we move forward over the next 3 years heading into the Rugby World Cup in 2027 in Australia. I think those teams that turn up to Australia with great depth across all positions is going to be something that gives them a huge advantage when it comes to their Rugby World Cup chances in Australia. And we've already seen how much depth the South Africans have, and it's been one of their mainstays of their team's success over recent years. And I think other countries now are really trying to step up and to match the depth of rugby within their top teams. So the All Blacks are going to have 3 years now to put together a squad that can go to the Rugby World Cup and be successful against the likes of South Africa and those other top teams that are going to probably make it through the knockout stage of that competition. But it all starts now, and I think the Rugby Championship in 2024 is the starting point for Razor and his group to have a look at how they can handle the pressure in different situations. Really the schedule this year for the All Blacks in the Rugby Championship, because I think it's going to help them really develop and build into the tournament. Those 2 games against Argentina to start off with in New Zealand are going to be a great litmus test to see where they're at against that extra competition that they're going to get from Argentina. Don't forget, Argentina had that fantastic win against France, and they're going to be coming into this first game against the All Blacks really believing that they can knock the All Blacks off again at home in New Zealand. And let's not forget, Wellington is a bit of a bogey ground for the All Blacks. They don't seem to like playing there, and I've already got a little bit of nerves around what that Wellington stadium can do to the All Blacks. And then they'll be off to South Africa to play those 2 games in South Africa, which is going to be absolutely epic, I'm sure. And then after that, they'll come back and they'll play Australia again. And that's going to be really interesting, because I think by the time we get to that series against Australia, we're going to see Australia go up to a new level, because they've had those games against Argentina and against South Africa. So really, really interesting Rugby Championship coming up this year from the All Blacks point of view. And I'm going to be really interested to see how this squad performs. Okay, so despite the All Blacks having 3 wins out of 3 games this year, what do I rate, or how do I rate the All Blacks' performances so far? Well, look, I'm going to give them about a 7 out of 10 so far in terms of their performance. They were fairly fortunate, I thought, to get across the line against England in that first game. The second game was a little bit more improved. And against Fiji, well, that was a good knockout, wasn't it, again, in terms of a game in San Diego. So I think the Rugby Championship is going to be really a big test for Scott Razor-Robertson and his coaching crew, as well as the squad, and I'm really looking forward to that. How do they improve on that 7 out of 10 in terms of my ranking system? Well, they need to be more comprehensive in the forwards, particularly in the line-out and the breakdown, and that's an area where I saw their opposition getting the better of them in those first 3 games. So I think those are positions, both the locks and the loose forwards, that need to be sorted out for the All Blacks, and we're going to see how they perform against a very big, strong and determined Argentina pack that's going to come to the Cake Tin in Wellington next weekend. So watch out for that. And then, of course, going up against South Africa, they're going to have to be on their mettle. The halfback position, we're going to see how that consolidates now with Cortez Ratama back in there with TJ Perenara, and obviously Hotham's going to be used when an injury comes up, or off the bench maybe in one of the other games, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. And then, of course, the Damian McKenzie, Bowden Barrett situation with Stephen Perifetta, Will Jordan, and Scott Razor-Robertson has been talking about Will Jordan playing at fullback. So that's going to be really interesting to see how Robertson manages that backline, both from a starting perspective, but also coming in off the bench and having the real impact the All Blacks need to have when they bring their bench on. So some fascinating questions that are unanswered so far ahead of this year's Rugby Championship. And that's how I see things with the All Blacks at this stage. So let me know in the comments what you think of the All Black squad that's been selected for the Rugby Championship. Do you think there's any players that have been unfortunate in missing out? What are your views around Finlay Christie? You all know what mine are by now. And I'd be interested to know what you think of Robertson's halfback selections in particular for the All Blacks. Okay, well, that's it for this particular video. I'm going to be back again soon with 2 more videos on the build-up to the Rugby Championship this year. I'm going to be talking about Argentina and what they've been up to so far this year, as well as Australia. And of course, they're under Joe Schmidt this year in 2024, so that's going to be really interesting to see as well. Those videos will come out before next week. Then next week, I'll be making preview videos for each of the games we're going to see next weekend, talking about the teams that have been selected, and then my in-depth views on how I see those games happening. So make sure you stick around here with Inside Rugby with Mark. The best way to do that, of course, is hit the subscribe button. If you haven't today, give it a bit of a thumbs up, and don't forget to drop me your comments. I read them all and are very interested in what your opinions are and what your views are on the topics that I'm talking about in these videos. So I look forward to reading all of those. Okay, time for me to go now. Stay safe, stay well, everyone. Keep enjoying your rugby no matter where you are in the world. And I'll see you again very, very shortly from here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Until then, it's bye for now.